Oh, and yes, this is where this particular class ended yesterday. Now, the big thing that AP is going to ask you about there, big thing that AP is going to ask you about is about the fight over the World War I treaty, okay? Now, very, very important that you guys know what the 14 points were, because the peace, y'all, that was of World War I was to be based on these 14 points. Now, find those in your notes. And Wilson, a few months after we had entered the war, Wilson announced these points. And the idea was to let the Germans know that this would not be a really harsh peace like a lot of pieces had been, and hopefully get them to surrender early on. And remember, y'all, Wilson is an idealist. He thinks that he can figure out, as this progressive president, that he can figure out a way to stop future wars. Now, make sure in your notes you write down somewhere, because you guys know in AP they like you to make connections across eras. Compare this to the Atlantic Charter of World War II. And early on, before even the United States entered World War II, President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill, y'all, met up in Newfoundland, and they wrote the Atlantic Charter and announced it. Now, the Atlantic Charter, y'all, was going to try to do the same thing. What are we fighting for? What do we hope to get out of this war? And both of them included a plan, a post-war plan for some international body to stop warfare. Now, of course, the World War the World War II one, what would that be called, y'all? The international agreement to stop war after World War II. Well, not pre-Versailles. What do we have today? It's like NATO, but much, much bigger. And it's, NATO is an alliance, right, against war. Y'all are the what? United Nations. Thank you. Did you say that, Janelle? Yeah. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was hearing it. All right, the United Nations. Okay, his version is going to be the League of Nations. Thank you. Yeah. Now, remember, and here's just a copy of it from his speeches. Now, the first thing that comes out of this is the idea of freedom of the seas. Remember, the Lusitania had been sunk. It wasn't an American ship. It was a British ship, but, Americans were killed. Wilson had this idea that you should not impair ships traveling back and forth. Trade was supposed to be free, right? Now, we don't mean, free stuff. By free trade, y'all, we mean no tariffs. There would be no tariff wars. And this would help minimize the chance of future wars. No more secret treaties between other countries. They had to be announced. One of the problems had been that the Italians, y'all, made a secret treaty with the French and the British to get some Austrian-Hungarian territory, which is why the Italians entered on the Allied side rather than the Central Power side. There's going to be a big movement after the war, y'all, and one of the things you guys will see in a video that I'll post that I talked about some of the weapons of the war is a lot of people, y'all, wanted disarmament. Okay, now in the 70s and 80s, we're going to see a big push for nuclear disarmament. What they wanted to do, y'all, was end the weapons like, massive bombers and planes. But the big thing, y'all, was naval ships, right? Getting rid of battleships and things like that. And the United States, despite not joining the League of Nations, the United States does cooperate in naval reduction. And this would be that body, the League of Nations, okay? Now, this is only really 5 or so of the points. Now, I'm going to let you see a weird video here, okay? This is a teacher by the name of Mr. Betts. Mr. Betts, those of you that were here yesterday, anybody after school, he does some pretty funny videos, but teaches really great stuff in them. And he's going to talk about the 14 points using 14 different shirts, or putting them on. So here we go.
14 points for Woodrow Wilson's plan for the post-war world. Do you know what they actually were? Today we're going to review them while wearing 14 shirts!
This should help you remember it.
Welcome back, class. Now you remember World War I, right? No? Okay, here it is in a nutshell. Picture the worst club you can imagine. Everybody packing heat, wearing sleeveless flag t-shirts and pumping awful European dance music. Some random scuffs up some Austrian guy's Air Jordans and boom, a melee breaks out. Everybody's fighting because everybody has everybody else's back, and they're trying to settle a score from when their rivals stole their lunch money or their fertile land back in the 7th grade. And all the while, the U.S. is feeling lucky to have an ocean between them and this World Cup calamity. That wouldn't last. See, the United States tried to remain neutral, uninvolved, and non-aligned with Europe's entangling alliances and imperialism. And remember, when the United States takes over new land, it's not imperialism, it's manifest destiny! But eventually, unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmerman Note, in which Germany told Mexico
so you're getting a good little review here
back from the U.S. if it became its Senora Frau, it kind of pushed then-President Woodrow Wilson's hand. Yes, this is the same Wilson that just won re-election with the slogan, "He kept us out of war." And the guy that wrote that slogan is the same guy that called World War I the war to end all wars. So the U.S. entered the war, victory was on the horizon, and Woodrow Wilson gave his 14-point statement. Now, Wilson's 14 points given in January 1918 were unique because, well, Wilson was the only leader that openly stated what he hoped to get out of the war. Everybody else was like, just wait till we're through.
Well, really, remember the French, the British, they want revenge, they want territory.
Being another t-shirt.
They want reparations.
Open covenants of peace. Now, being at the intersection of a shady
offer, that's the open treaties.
Into the war, a pledge for open diplomacy seems appropriate. Point 2, freedom of the seas. Again, what dragged us in? Point 3, the removal of economic trade barriers.
No trade barriers.
You're less likely to punch your customers in the face, usually. Point 4, disarmament. Now, leading up to the start of the war, everybody, especially Germany and England, were strapped like they were in an 80s action movie. In order to avoid a Chekhov's gun situation, Wilson wanted weapon levels lowered across the board. Point 5, the adjustment of colonial claims based on principles of self-determination.
Never forget.
That must have went over well in Europe. Now, point 6 through 13 were all about specific territorial issues. Point 6, Russia. The Germans will.
Now we'll look at a map and we'll see what was given up.
See how this Bolshevik thing turns out. This just in, not very good. Point 7, Belgium and the evacuation of German troops from it. Point 8, France gives Alsace-Lorraine back from the Germans. France was still whining about it 50 years after the Franco-Prussian War. Point 9, Italy and the adjustments of its borders, mainly given it some of Austria-Hungary as a
which is why it joined in the first place.
Point 10, Austria-Hungary will continue to be an independent nation. Point 11, the Balkans. Just like countries like Serbia, Montenegro, and Romania.
Where the war started.
Their thing. Point 12, the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Turkish people can have their own country, but the non-Turkish people should have their own country. You know what?
Where you get divided up the Middle East.
Point 13, Poland. That's going to be a thing again. And finally, point 14, a League of Nations will be formed to protect the independence of all countries, big and small. So what did everybody think of these 14 points? On the surface, great. Wilson's idealistic peace without blame helped him win the Nobel Peace Prize, and many believe it persuaded Germans to seek the armistice, thinking that these would be the conditions of peace. Many Europeans saw them as a fair and easy way to just end the dang thing already. But some leaders had other plans. France's Prime Minister Clemenceau thought they were too idealistic, lovey-dovey, and arrogant. Easy for Wilson to say, being that he was the last one to join the World War Royal Rumble. That attitude led to the much harsher conditions in the Treaty of Versailles, conditions like war reparations, which would help fuel a future Führer's claim of betrayal. At home, the Republican Senate refused to approve any treaty that would have us join the League of Nations on basis of the whole entangling alliance thing, which means that we never even ratified the dramatically punitive Treaty of Versailles. Technically, we were still at war till 1921 when separate peace treaties were signed. Guess the last one in is the last one out. But what if a peace was made that truly followed the 14 points? Would totalitarianism and fascism take hold in Europe? Would decolonization still have to wait till halfway through the 20th century? Would the United States have been dragged back into an overseas war even sooner? Let me know what you think in the comments.
All right, so there you go. The 14 points. You probably won't forget them now after Mr. Betts there. So anyway, y'all, Woodrow Wilson, this becomes his baby, right? He is going to pledge his life, his reputation, everything, y'all, on getting this peace treaty done. Now, it's not like today when a president can hop on a plane and go over to Europe and be back in a matter, in a day or so. Wilson had to go by ship. Ironically enough, the ship he went by was a ship that had been taken from the Germans when America went to war. They took over any German ships that were in our dock, and that was the ship he goes over there on. And this is the first time we've had a president leave the United States for an extended period of time and go to a completely another hemisphere. Y'all. He wanted to, sorry about the misspelling there, oversee. I guess I was thinking of going over the seas, but he wanted to oversee this peace process personally. This was too important a thing, y'all, to be left up to diplomats. Now, Wilson, y'all, was literally seen as a hero. This picture here really shows it well. People saw America and the president, y'all, as the country that had saved Europe, that had ended this war. And remember, American troops really did turn the tide. And Wilson comes over there, and I mean, they literally, y'all, they're throwing flowers in front of his feet. The kids are, right? That's kind of the hero he was. And like I said, he was very idealistic. And as Mr. Betts said, had we followed a lot of those things, maybe Hitler wouldn't have come to power. Maybe it would have been a very different post-war Germany. But Clemenceau, the French leader, who you'll see here in just a sec, and David Lloyd George, the British prime minister, those guys had other plans. They planned to punish Germany. Now remember, the French wanted revenge for the war in 1870. And everything they do, y'all, is going to be about payback to Germany for what they did. Lloyd George wants money and wants them to pay, he said, for every broken window, for every bullet shot, everything like that. So Wilson, y'all, is going to find it really, really hard going. Now, on your notes, I asked you who these guys are. If you just remember the big four, that's fine. Here's Woodrow Wilson here standing alone. That kind of tells you something, right? Over here, we see David Lloyd George, the British leader, talking to Clemenceau, who had been a teacher, by the way, and knew English about as well as anybody. And yeah, David is his first name. And this guy kind of standing by himself, y'all, that's Orlando. He is the leader of Italy, and he didn't speak English. And it turns out that Italy is not even considered a whole lot. Basically, the big four end up being really kind of the great 3.5, right? Now, remember, Wilson, y'all, he believes the League of Nations is the one thing he's got to save. He gives up point by point, y'all, on most of those 14 points. He gives up, he compromises, he lets them set up really, really high reparations. He gives up on this idea of ending a lot of the colonization, and we end up getting a very harsh peace. But he thought that was okay because he got them to agree to the League of Nations. And in his mind, y'all, the League of Nations would save everything. If we can just have a League of Nations, we can fix these problems down the way. Little does he know, he's not going to be able to get this to happen. Now, if you just remember the big four, right? The big four, and that's Wilson. And if you don't have to remember David Lloyd George and Clemenceau, but these four men, y'all, or like I said, 3 men. The fourth is Orlando. Think of Florida. Wilson, David Lloyd George, you see his name up there, and Clemenceau. You don't have to, you guys don't really have to know all those things. In World War II, there'll be the big 3, and that'll be, of course, Roosevelt, Stalin, and Churchill as leaders. But think about it, y'all. These people have the world. They have the future of the world in their hands. I mean, imagine that. Now, Wilson, y'all, and Wilson is a stubborn guy. I mean, he's super smart. He's a college professor. He had written classic books on American history, on American political science, and yet he doesn't show a lot of common sense. Because what he does, y'all, is he only brings one Republican with him. Now, remember, he's a Democrat. Why is that a big deal? Well, in 1918, in the off-year elections, the midterm elections, Republicans had won the House and the Senate. And so he, a Democrat, is going to have to get a Democratic treaty through a Republican Senate. Now, you guys have heard the term ownership, right? You have to take ownership of something. You got to have something, some role in it. What if your parents were to come to you and say, hey, I've already picked your college. I got a great dorm room for you, and you're going to love the roommate I found for you. And hey, I got your major too. Well, you'd be like, do I have any say in this? Come on, you know, you're not going to be real happy. Now, if they sat down with you, of course, as long as they promise to pay, you wouldn't maybe mind it so much. So Republicans, y'all, are going to be basically given a Democratic treaty. They have no ownership. They have no influence on it. And as a result, they are going to turn it down. And you would think Wilson, with his obvious political knowledge, would have brought along some of these guys and gave them part of the goal of doing it. Now, he's gone a long time, y'all. He's gone for multiple months. Now, when the peace treaty is ultimately signed in mid-1919, and by the way, y'all, the treaty was so harsh that the Germans at one point considered walking out, okay? The Germans considered walking out, but the British, y'all, were keeping this blockade going on here and saying, look, we'll keep doing this until you sign it. We'll invade Germany, if necessary. And so Germany was forced to sign it under pressure. Hitler will use this, y'all, in coming to power. Now, the world you and I live in today, y'all, was greatly impacted by this treaty of 103 years ago. New countries are created. They literally get the map out, y'all, and redraw the map of Europe, and not in the best way. Now, one of the countries created, y'all, is right here, Poland, right? There you see Poland. Now, Poland had been a country once before, but remember, y'all, Russia, after having its two revolutions in 1917, Russia has a civil war. So Russia is in a mess, y'all, and various parts of Russia are going to seek their own independence. Poland is recognized as a country again, but there's a catch, y'all. If you look at this right here, do you see this little thing here that is between, that's right between Germany and Poland? This would become known as the Polish corridor. Now, Poland, as it was shown here, was a landlocked country. It had no access to the Baltic Sea. So what they did is they created an area here through which Poland could get to what was called the international city of Danzig, okay, today called Gdansk, and they could get through to there. But the trouble is, this splits Germany. Here is East Prussia. Here's the rest of Germany. When World War II starts, y'all, that is going to be what Hitler's justification is. He's reuniting Germany. He's getting rid of this Polish corridor. So right there, y'all, they're setting one of the stages for World War II. The country of Czechoslovakia, shown right here, okay, is created out of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, it is broken up into two countries, the Czech Republic, the Slovak Republic, or Slovakia. Kind of hard to see, I know, with that blue, but we get Yugoslavia. Now, Yugoslavia was also created out of the remains of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was to be a land of Slavs, that is, the Slavic people like the Russians. Today, of course, it's much more than that, right? Today, it's been broken up into 5, 6, 8, whoever's counting, because there's all kinds of disputes about what's a country and what's not.
Finland, 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 the country where I want to be pony trekking.
There's Finland up here.
Or just watching TV.
All right, so I include that, y'all, because my wife is a Finnish background, so salute to them. Now, in World War II, y'all, Russia will try to get Finland back, right? And the Finns, at least for the first year or so, are going to back them off. Yeah, what's going on? Did you fix it? Okay, this is awesome. And it works? It works. Okay, that only took an hour?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to fill it up with water again. It tastes better out of an Italian glass.
You can never.
Oh, okay, good. Good job, y'all. All righty. Appreciate that. They just brought me a bottle that, that I've been trying to get that fixed, y'all, here for a while. So good to know that my fellow teachers are much smarter than me. All right, but the thing is, y'all, in the news today, right? I mean, you've heard this discussion. You guys know we've talked a lot in class about the Ukrainian invasion. Remember, the Ukraine was not part of NATO. Many people believe that's one of the things that helped precipitate, at least that's what maybe people claim, the invasion was that they were considering possibly joining NATO, right? Okay, Finland and Sweden, y'all, have both also been neutral countries and not part of NATO. Seeing what happened to Ukraine, that wasn't part of NATO, they now are considering joining NATO. And of course, Putin has said, well, if you do that, I'll invade you too. But seeing how the Ukrainian thing isn't going so well, I don't know if that's that big a deal. But Finland, y'all, has always had a really difficult existence, being kind of between, those two places, and being part of Russia at one time. This is hard to see here. Iraq, IRAQ. Here it is. Now, Iraq, y'all, is drawn up also from the old Ottoman Empire, and Iraq, y'all, is made a British mandate. Not quite a colony, but British troops will be there. British troops will try to do it. But the trouble is, y'all, the people that drew up these borders, much like what happened with Africa in the 1880s and things, they don't really know the history, the ethnic problems, the religious issues. And Iraq, y'all, is a mess. And of course, it's going to lead to ultimately wars with its neighbor, at the time called Persia, today called Iran. And you have a large number of people of Persian or Iranian background living in Iraq. They would like to be part of Iran. And when they drew this up, y'all, they didn't really think about that. Transjordan, here you see Palestine, now modern Israel, the Lebanon, as they used to call it, and Syria. Now, all these states, y'all, are places where there are problems today. A lot of it due to these guys drawing up the maps and not doing such a great job. Now, up here, y'all, are the Baltic states. Now, these countries today are part of NATO. Now, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Now, they get their independence after World War I from Russia. But in one of the events that leads to World War II, in 1939, Hitler makes a deal with the Soviet leader Stalin to split Poland, but also the Germans will let him take Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania and won't say anything about that. So they go back to being Soviet, and for 50 years, y'all, they'll stay Soviet. Today, they're independent countries. But they are part of NATO, as I said. And, if Putin were to make a effort at any of these countries today, y'all, they're all part of NATO, and it would require that we help them. Number 7, as I said, Syria right here, that was under French control, as well as Lebanon. And these borders, y'all, really, really helped pave the way for the problems of World War II. These guys might have been ending World War I, but in a lot of ways, they were setting up the next generation for World War II, because you would see all kinds of ethnic fights. You still do to this day between various groups that are trapped in there. Yugoslavia, y'all, is going to explode into a terrible civil war in the 1990s. Some of the worst atrocities of the 20th century occurred right there. Okay. Oh, back? All right. Let you just see that. So ultimately, y'all, we're going to look at the ratification, as Cajun Man says, and we're going to see that it fails. We are not able to get this treaty passed. Okay. You good now? All right. Now, ratification. Yep, major fail sound. Now, I apologize for the small print on this. This is a very heavily text page here, y'all. But it is the League of Nations being included in the Treaty of Versailles that's going to lead to it not passing, y'all. Because basically, if you agreed to end the war against Germany, in the treaty, there was Article 10, right? Article X10. And it said, you are joining the League of Nations. All right. Now, as I said, the Republicans, Wilson's enemies, had majorities in both houses. They had won them in the 1918 midterm elections. Even though we were winning World War I, y'all, and World War I was days from ending, Americans rejected the Democrat Wilson and his party, and they put Republicans in control of both houses. Now, remember the man I told you that looked like the most interesting man in the world, Henry Cabot Lodge? This is the guy who leads the opposition. Now, the thing is, y'all, Wilson could have maybe saved this, but remember, Wilson is a stubborn man. He's already compromised everything except for the League of Nations. There's no more compromise left in this guy. Now, Henry Cabot Lodge says, look, Wilson, I'm willing to pass this treaty, but there are certain reservations I have, certain things that if you change it, I'll throw my support, my colleagues' support behind it. Of course, one of them was this League of Nations thing. Remember, his real fear is if we sign this, if we join this League of Nations, it might require us to go to war in some part of the world Americans can't even locate because we're part of it, okay? But there were other Republicans who were known as the irreconcilables. There was nothing that could be said to these people that would make them support the treaty. But the thing is, y'all, there were enough reservationists, which if added to the Democrats, could have got this treaty through the Senate. The irreconcilables, y'all, were in the minority. But together, if they both voted no, y'all, there was no way this treaty was going to pass. Now, Wilson, y'all, and he's not the best speaker in the world. He's not bad. But Wilson believes, y'all, that the American people can force their senators to change their mind. Now, much like President Truman in 1948 goes on this, train trip around the country and convinces people to vote for him, Wilson tries the same thing. Wilson hops on a train and he makes his way all over the country where he speaks directly to the people. Now, we call this going over the heads of the lawmakers. You're basically saying to them, you're saying to the people, you call, you write, you telegraph your senators. You let them know that you want this Treaty of Versailles. You want this League of Nations. Tell them you won't vote for them. You won't contribute money to them. Now, and of course, some people listen to it and put pressure on the senators, but not enough. And it's a great way, y'all, to get senators to hate your guts. So Wilson is making this trip, y'all, and he is busting his tail. He's talking every day for hours, and he's getting exhausted. And then one day in Pueblo, Colorado, he's up there giving a speech, and all of a sudden the train starts spinning around him, and the people start spinning on around him, and he collapses, okay? He just falls right over. They put him on a train. They go right back to Washington, D.C. I mean, all the way in Colorado, that's a long trip. When they get him back there, he has a severe stroke. And I mean, it's a bad one. He's not able to talk, not able to use his arm. It's a very, very debilitating stroke. And he never, to be honest, completely recovers. He'll be dead in 2 or 3 years after this. So this is what I mean, y'all. The guy literally gave his life trying to get this treaty passed. But ultimately, at least it failed. Now, this is a very interesting kind of topic, y'all. I think anyway, you guys know we've yet to have a woman president, sadly. But is that necessarily true? Because if you look at your notes, there's a picture there of a woman with Wilson. Now, this woman was his new wife, his first wife, who he owed a lot of getting elected to. She was an amazing artist, y'all, and gave up her impressionist art job to help her husband become governor of New Jersey and president of the United States, only to die not too long into his presidency. So he finds another wife, Edith Galt, okay? He marries her. Now, the thing is, y'all, I don't know if she didn't want the Senate to really see in how bad a shape Wilson was or not, but she basically became his intermediary. When senators came to talk about their problems with it, to seek Wilson to maybe modify it, to make compromises, she talked for them to him. She said, well, let me go talk to the president. I'll talk to him about that, and I'll let you know. And then, if things needed signing, I'll take it to the president. He'll sign it. Although I've heard stories that his signature looked a lot like hers. But anyway, so it is very possible, y'all, that indeed we did have a woman president for about a year, as Edith Wilson basically kind of fulfilled the role of her husband. Now, this experience, y'all, has led to what's called the 25th Amendment, right? Now, the 25th Amendment You heard some people talking about it with Trump. You may hear some people talking about it with Biden. I've heard grumbles of that kind of stuff too. But the thing is what do you do if you have a president who is not mentally all there? You have a president who is physically debilitated to the point they can't do their job, like Wilson was. Well, in the past, y'all, we just used to have to grin and bear it and hope it worked out okay. The 25th Amendment, y'all, allows for us to replace, if temporary necessarily, the president. Now, how does that go down? Basically, y'all, the cabinet has to look at it, and the cabinet, who's supposed to meet with the president frequently, makes a decision. Yep, president's in good shape. He, she can do their job. Okay. If on the other hand, they say no, this guy, this gal, not all there, you know, elevator didn't go to the top floor anymore. We need to do something. Now, the president can disagree with that. And if so, it goes to the House, and the House investigates it and makes a decision. And the president, y'all, we can remove a president if we see that mentally and or physically they are unable to do the job. Now, and that's never been done, fortunately. But we have had presidents, y'all, who voluntarily gave up the presidency for hours or a day or so. Let's say they're undergoing surgery, right? They're undergoing something where they're going underneath the knife and they're going to have to get, put under for a while, right? You know, Reagan did it. Bush did it. I don't know if Clinton ever had any surgeries. I don't think Obama ever did. But several different times that our presidents, y'all, were not able to do their job for a few hours or a couple of days. And can you imagine that? Like, your vice president, somebody says, you're president for the next couple of hours, dude. What you want to do, you know? And so that's kind of fascinating. Now, ultimately, y'all, the treaty does not pass. Why? Well, Wilson's illness, his stubbornness, whatever, it fails to pass. And as a result, y'all, as you heard Mr. Betts say in his song, it takes until 1921, 2 more years, y'all, for us to make a separate peace treaty with Germany, with Austria-Hungary, with the Ottoman Empire, and all of that. And we never joined the League. Now, and because of this, y'all, and I know this is, let's just hear that again. Yeah, there we go. America never joins the League, and many historians claim this is why the League fails. Now, after World War II, the United States is going to be central to the creation of the United Nations. I mean, heck, the building is in New York City. We're the most important member, the biggest contributor to the United Nations. So did we maybe learn a lesson? I don't know. The League, y'all, it does do some good work. One of the things I hope to do if I ever get a chance to retire is work on a book on the League of Nations, because I think everybody only remembers its failures, and there were a lot of those. It failed to stop Hitler in Germany. It fails to stop Mussolini of Italy, and of course the Japanese in China. But it did do some things, and a lot of people don't remember that. It took me a long time to record that on my trombone. Back. I know that is a ridiculously busy screen. I usually don't put that much up there on one, so I apologize for that, y'all. Trust me, I went over that and I kept cutting and cutting. I should have spread it to 2 screens. All right, so in the next slide, y'all, we're going to look at the League of Nations. I'm going to show you its building, show you where it was located, and go over some of that with y'all. Okay, let me know when you're done.
That people basically claim that he was the president for a year, right?
Well, a lot of historians have said that. I mean, I don't know really how clear his mind was. I don't know if you guys watch Breaking Bad or if you guys watched Don't Call Saul, but you know the character on there that's in the wheelchair and he has a little bell that he can hit, like, once for no, a couple times for yes or whatever. Or in the old Star Trek, Captain Pike, he can like 1 light, 2 lights, yes, no, kind of like that. I don't think Wilson could do a whole lot, and maybe it's been exaggerated, but she definitely played an important role in advising him. And the thing is, he probably couldn't dispute anything that she did, right? Yeah. So she could come down and tell the guys or whatever. And I think she really didn't want them to see how bad a shape he was, or they might have demanded that, you know, the vice president take over or do something. Who, that's his name? Henry Cabot Lodge, right? Yeah, and definitely remember him. He's on your star test, okay? Or he could be. He's listed in the teats to maybe be on your star test. All right, so there you go, okay? All right, so smaller slide, thank goodness. This is actually the symbol for the League of Nations. If you're old enough, it looks kind of like the Chrysler symbol. Now, what was the League? It's the predecessor to the United Nations. It's like, you know, United Nations 1.0.
Where is
This is it on your notes? It may not even be there. I think I just left this to talk about. You don't have to write it down. Just watch. Now, it's supposed to settle the disputes between countries that lead to wars. Here's the building, which is still there today. It may be used, I think, by the United Nations. I'm not sure. I remember reading about it once. But that's where they met. Switzerland, remember? Supposed to be a neutral country, right? It's a good place for it to meet. But remember, we never joined. Why? That fear that it will drag us into a war for which we really have no reason to join. Now, remember, NATO is an alliance where you have to support each other. This isn't quite like that, but the idea behind it is if there is some aggressor somewhere, the different nations should maybe work together and be able to stop a particular aggressor. But the thing is, y'all, without the United States as, you know, big muscle, they would not really do that. They went ahead and let Hitler do all he wanted to. So their biggest failure, the League of Nations, y'all, is to stop World War II, right? They don't stop Hitler when he goes into the Rhineland, when he goes into Austria. They don't stop Mussolini when he goes into Ethiopia. They don't stop the Japanese in Manchuria or whatever. All they do is issue sanctions, you know, complain, but they don't send troops. They also tried to not sell oil or whatever to some of these places, but none of that worked very well. Now, here is the Treaty of Versailles. Separate little thing, just be aware of this. You don't have to write this down. It's signed a year after the war. This is a very, very famous painting. It's in a lot of the history textbooks. Now, as I said, y'all, there's a lot of psychology. There's a lot of revenge kind of attitude here. Now, when the Palace of Versailles, y'all, is an absolutely amazing building. I mean, imagine about 5 Dobbies, y'all, connected, and it being one person's home, right? The King of France. It was built by Louis XIV, I think the 15th and 16th, all of them. I think it kept going on. And the most remarkable room is the Hall of Mirrors. Imagine, y'all, almost a football field length kind of room, all right, filled with mirrors. So it looks like it's even bigger than it is. Now, in 1871, as France lost the war with Germany, or technically Prussia, the French had their nose rubbed in it by the Germans. The Germans insisted that the French sign the peace treaty right there. They insisted that the French recognize Germany right there. And so just like the railroad car that I've mentioned, the French decided, let's get some revenge here, and let's make the Germans sign this peace treaty right here. Now, it is very much, most historians believe, a harsh peace. It didn't do much of what Wilson had promised that this treaty would be based on. Germany lost all of its overseas colonies. Germany lost its territories, like, for example, in Africa and the Pacific. Germany itself, as you saw, was slightly divided with that Polish corridor. And one of the toughest things for Germany, y'all, is what are called reparations. Germany was asked to pay, I think it was like $33 billion in reparations. Now, that's a lot of money back then. Today, you know, that's like nothing. But that was a lot of money back then. And that is going to really hurt Germany after the war. Now, before you feel too sorry for Germany, however, when Germany had won the war against the French in 1871, they had made the French pay very high reparations. So once again, y'all, there's a lot of payback, literally, in this case. And so what you see is the Germans are given these high reparations. Now, this is going to cause all kinds of economic problems in post-war Germany. Germany's going to have to print lots of money. Germany's going to have to borrow money. The United States will borrow money. Will loan them money so that Germany can pay France and Britain the reparations, so that France and Britain can then pay us back from for all the loans we gave them before we officially entered the war. So we're basically loaning money, y'all, to people to pay people who then pay us back. It was a crazy system. Now, as I said before, this treaty is never ratified because of its inclusion of the League of Nations. This is the actual treaty, what it looks like. And finally, okay, it helps lead Hitler to power, right? More than anything, y'all, Hitler capitalized on hatred of the Treaty of Versailles, this dictated peace. A lot of people wonder, how the heck could people have elected this guy? He didn't seize power, y'all. He was elected, okay? And he was elected popularly by the people because he promised to fix it. And we know how that worked out. Now, it didn't work out very well. So here's Hitler telling a joke, y'all. That's really not what he's saying in German, but that was on Monty Python, and I thought it was pretty funny. My dog has no nose. How does he smell? He smells terribly. All right. Y'all have a great weekend. Hopefully I'll see some of y'all there tomorrow.